Hello, this is John Hansen, Kathy Hansen,
Hello.
and we're here today to present episode number 5. The topic for today is our bed and breakfast, the Morris Mulberry Inn, which we bought in August of
1994.
1994. And Kathy had a couple of reasons for going, and
Yeah, one of the questions, Marie said, why did you buy it? So Margie, my sister Margie, who's a year and 3 days younger than me, they lived by us for a short time when we were living in Chandler, Arizona. And then they went to California and we went to Texas. And they moved to St. George. She was doing real estate. And she found this place for sale. And she thought, you should move here. You should run this bed and breakfast. So I never run a bed and breakfast before. But let me just tell you about living in St. George. We lived there for 8.5 years. We liked living there. The job was good. John worked in Mexico. Here. But every time, truthfully, every time we returned to St. George, like we would go out of town on a weekend trip or something, driving home to St. George, it never felt like home to me. And we'd lived lots of places by then, but that was the one place that never felt like home.
remember you're referring to El Paso, dear.
Excuse me, that's right. I'm confused. Living in El Paso, we would go to travel to do lots of vacations, trips to Cloudcroft, trips to New Mexico, Carlsbad Caverns. But returning home to El Paso, it never felt like home. And even when we went all the way up to Utah and came back, it just didn't feel like home. Although that was our home, we lived there for a long time, but it didn't feel like the permanent place. So we moved to St. George. And
One of the other reasons that Kathy missed or alluded was that she was feeling the ever-present danger of the gangs growing in El Paso, coming across from the border.
Okay, I'll tell you.
That was really just beginning because we got to, right before we moved, there were starting to be high school shootings, drive-bys from the outside.
And I used to go for a walk every morning. He went to work early into Mexico. But when I started seeing graffiti on the neighborhood garage doors, I knew that was getting pretty bad. Because we know downtown El Paso had problems, but we were living on the west side and east side. We started seeing those kind of problems. It just didn't feel right. Nathan was turning, when we lived there, he was turning 16, get ready to go get a driver's license. But he actually, well, first of all, he didn't have his ego. But to insure him, to add him to our insurance, would be $100 a month. $100 a month just to add one child. That was a lot of money then. Of course, that's pretty good now. But it was because there are so many vehicles stolen in El Paso on a regular basis. I'm pretty sure it was 100 plus a day vehicles stolen.
At times.
And or else they'd be pieced out. You might have one time we were at church and everybody had their rearview mirrors stolen. Taillights. All of our taillights for a certain van, we all had the Aerostar van, taillights were gone. And somebody says, oh yeah, I know where you can buy those downtown at a swap meet. So we had to go down and probably buy our own taillights back. But anyway, that's why we moved to St. George. And it was so fun living by Margie's family.
But there was, initially it was Kathy and Marie who moved out, packed up just within a moment's notice, and headed up in the car to St. George.
Everything we could fit in the car, we took with us. And the house was furnished. It had 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. And actually, I lived in one bedroom toward the back of the house, which had a door into the kitchen. And everything else was kind of closed off by a door to the kitchen and a door to the hallway. So the 4 bedrooms, 1 bedroom downstairs and 3 bedrooms upstairs, we rented. And it was a lot of fun. made up brochures. I mean, I can tell you how much it cost. It was like $49 was our cheapest room, $59. I think 79 and 99 were our rates for the bed and breakfast. And the most expensive was the bridal suite, which was downstairs and had more space. But we had a lot of business from you remember the name of the group?
We had an Amway customer who was, they had every year they'd put on this big Amway convention at the Dixie Center. And this one year the couple found us, and every time Amway would be there, they would be at our place. And they would rent all of our rooms out for those 2 or 3 nights.
And we'd fix big meals for them.
We catered to them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And even we'd have on the tables preparations for muffins. And after the convention was over, they'd all night out over at our place and have big convention, just big talks.
Talk.
Amongst themselves.
The next morning at breakfast,
friends.
they said, "Did you hear us last night? We were up until 2 o'clock in the morning. We hadn't heard a thing." So pretty good insulation in that old house. It was actually, it's called Morris Mulberry Inn because it was owned by Judge Morris in the early 1900s. And there were mulberry trees around it. So it was a very nice house. John worked at John Deere. Finally, so we moved in August. Brian came in October. The boys came at Christmas time.
The boys meaning Mike and John.
Yeah, Mike and Johnny came at Christmas time, and then Dad came in April. So he's working for a rock company, J&J Building Supply, and they said they paid all of their employees the same, $39,000, which was a lot less than what we had been making. But they gave you benefits. One of his benefits was getting block from the block plant. And so we finished the side of the house with a big, what'd you call it, patio.
Yeah, we put a nice big patio in. It was about 60 by 20, and we put it in pavers. My brother-in-law, Chris,
Margie's husband,
he came over and helped me. He was short on work, and we were in need of help on putting that patio in. So he came over every day and put that patio in. It taught him how to do a patio and how to do retaining wall. And so he did both those things for us on the end.
It was a lot of fun.
And it made it was a key point of entertaining. We'd have outdoor patio parties, and we had lights overhead, all strung up, Christmas lights, and the neighbors loved to hear us put the boys outside on the patio, and Spencer and Doug would come over, and they'd put together. We have a little sing-along going with the boys playing their guitars and drums. And
one of the things I remember about the side of the house, we had a yellow flower, jasmine, flowering jasmine. It was so sweet. It smelled so good out there. The boys, when they were the next year in high school, I don't know if it was the first year or the next year, they belonged to a dance club. And so they brought all the kids over and put on music, and they would do rock and roll out there.
Swing dancing,
the swing club. It was a lot of fun. All the kids loved our house. Of course, the flat was where the other boys lived, out in the flat. Well, actually,
the flat was a conversion of the 2-car garage that was there. We went in and insulated all the walls and the ceiling in there. And we put a bathroom out there, and eventually we had a little kitchenette, but had the bathroom and the washer and dryer out there first.
And it wasn't very well insulated. For the first year, when the kids were living there, we still had, how dumb, it was just so dumb. We still had because the washer and dryer were outside, and we didn't have it vented properly. So when the dryer was on, the whole place would heat up with that blow in from the dryer. That was kind of dumb.
It's kind of humid, but the other part of that, though, was that we went there and we couldn't afford to do much extra. And so as time went on, we were able to make improvements as we went. Now, the other thing is that the other question we had about this, about operating the bed and breakfast, was the great people we got to meet as they would come and stay at our place. We would typically have breakfast with them, and so we get to interview or talk with all of our guests around a common large dining room table, and that would allow us to get to know them. And so we'd find out what brought them to St. George, the parks, or whatever it was. We'd find out a little bit about them.
I'll tell you a funny thing. You can tell this joke. We had a couple who had come from back east. It was, St. George was temperate climate. And so in the fall, we still had flowers, like October, November, December, we still had flowers. And maybe it was early spring when this happened. One of our guests at breakfast said, "You know what? I was so surprised. You have concubines already growing outside."
She says, "They're really pretty." But I said, well, we can't really advertise those out there because
we don't put it in our brochure.
We don't put it in the brochure that we have concubines.
Other people started laughing around the table. They realized that she meant columbines.
And of course, they're a real pretty flower, very delicate looking. But she was easily humored. And it's just kind of experiences like that we enjoy visiting with people. And I think all you kids can attest to the idea that
we were
never more than a few minutes away from finding a friend.
The one thing that was very interesting is that most guests never knew we had any kids there. They never knew we had family because they came and the kids were in the back and they never saw the kids. We never ate out at the table unless, if we had guests, we weren't eating out at the dining room table, we were eating in the kitchen. And they were always surprised that we had family there, 4 kids in the garage.
The flat.
The flat.
And one of the responsibilities that the kids had, or one of the part of the fun of being in the flat was we had white walls on, and they were painted, but we had white walls out there, the sheetrock. And so we said, here's an opportunity for you kids to do your own decoration. So they all decorated it, had a great time signing their names, and their friends would come over, they'd sign their names on the walls of the flat. So
I was going to show you a picture here. Jared brought me these. This, let me just put it up here so you can see. This was 1995, July 1995. Nathan came to propose to Melanie. So this was the second summer we were there. And this is our first grandbaby. You see Priscilla and Eric with baby Caleb. He was born in January. So he was just a few months old when this picture was taken. But I love that picture. Our whole family. And that was the day that Nathan proposed to Melanie.
Yes. You have another picture. I think you have.
I didn't.
Do you have one at the end?
No, I don't have a picture of the bed and breakfast with me. But let me just tell you one more thing. We had a relationship with the St. George Travelers Bureau. Anyway, there was a company that helped to bring people in. And so we had a lot of guests that were referred to us from this company. And one time, this is a sweet memory, we had to board Temple Night. And we had somebody coming in, and they were with there was some kind of a Mormon group that was getting together for a convention. And we were going to the temple, so I went to the temple and left a note on the door to say, "Come on in, here's your room, this is the room you'll go to." The next morning at breakfast, it was, do you remember his name?
Oh, Sister Otley.
Okay, that was one time.
Uh-huh.
Sister Otley, her husband was Gerald Otley, the director of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and she commented on how sweet it was that we could leave our doors unlocked, that it was safe enough in St. George to leave the doors unlocked that she could come in. But that wasn't the night I was thinking of. The night I was thinking of was the guests at our table were a mom and baby and her husband. So they had a bunch of kids at home, but they brought the baby because it was still a nursing baby. And this man was in the movie at the temple. He was Satan. And I recognized him because he had kind of a big beauty marker, or whatever you call it, a freckle type thing on his face, a big mole on his face. And I recognized him. I said, I think I saw you in the movie last night. He said, yeah, that's me. But he was right there eating breakfast with us.
Like we said, we saw Sister Otley there at breakfast one time, and she wrote a piece in our guest book about how friendly the place was and how secure she felt coming there and staying with us. Later on, just a couple of years later, we were visiting in Hawaii. And
at the Polynesian Cultural Center.
Yeah, and there, sitting at a table having lunch, was Brother and Sister Otley. They had been just called on a mission to the Polynesian Cultural College. Was not the college, but
it was
BYU Hawaii.
BYU Hawaii.
And so we pulled their chairs up over by them and had an opportunity to visit with them a lot.
She remembered coming to our place. We had a very interesting man and his wife. We also had a relationship with the same company, would send people who were coming into the Dixie College concert series. They had once a month a concert group that would come in. And this man and his wife had come from New York City. He was a jazz pianist. And he was so thrilled with our little quaint house in a small town. He was from New York City. Actually, he was from Poland. He said, I'm from Poland. I live in New York City, but I don't think that's America. I think this is America. And he went out, it was the fall, and he went out, his wife was picking up leaves because the leaves were falling. And she was picking up leaves to mail home to her friends to say, we were at this place and they have leaves falling, and he said every place we live is concrete and asphalt. So he was very, very polite. I had a long time I had his CD. I don't know where it is now, but jazz pianist.
It was fun. They communicated with us for several years. He would do cruises and perform on those as well. But it was just fun to know them and the unique things about St. George that they thought of as being really Americana.
One thing about, Marie said, why did you buy it? Well, we bought it because it was an interesting thing, but actually I was not the sister. I have 5 sisters. I was not the sister who was the entertainer. Becky was the one who always made these lavish meals. She always put on great events, and she should have been the one to do a bed and breakfast. Sharon also is a great cook. And I fed people. I knew how to feed kids, and I always had a nice breakfast. The thing that we figured out was food is the same, presentation makes a big difference. So we always used china and goblets and silverware. And we always had the table set very pretty with all these things. We always had muffins. One of our favorites everybody liked was the cinnamon muffins, and we had poppy seed muffins, banana bread muffins. I had a bread maker, and so I would have bread that was scheduled to go off in the morning, and of course that fills the house with this great aroma of homemade bread. And one of our favorite things that everybody liked was
French toast casserole.
French toast casserole with apple cider syrup. Becky gave me the recipe for apple cider syrup. And another thing was maple leaf appetizers, so like Polish sausage and pineapple in a kind of a sweet and sour sauce. It was really good.
So we decided, based on that great menu we had in cuisine, that we ought to produce a cookbook. And we had seen cookbooks it would kind of fold open like a calendar. And so it would self-stand on your counter, and that way you could read the ingredients while you're cooking it up.
I have one over there. I don't want to go get it right now, but anyway, Bed and Breakfast Morris Mulberry Inn cookbook. Originally, we had a paper in there that says, we'll send you this cookbook for $10 plus $3.95 shipping and handling, because that's what it cost for priority mail at that time. Long time ago.
Well, we still have a couple hundred of those books left.
And
we've hauled them around everywhere we've moved ever since.
One thing about the bed and breakfast, it was never a money maker. John always had a job. I started working as an appraiser. I was working for a company that did commercial appraisal, and I was doing the reports. The
Research.
When you do a commercial appraisal, you have to have like a 10 or 20 page report about the area. So I put together those things for him. I was doing research, and then later on I got my own appraiser's certificate, and I licensed. So I was licensed for a little bit to do residential appraising, and I wasn't very good at it, but did that for a short time.
The other thing was that we gave the cookbooks away to all of our students who were getting married at BYU. We had our BYU ward, and we gave them away to people, friends of ours in various places where we've lived.
So having a bed and breakfast means we were never as busy as a hotel, okay? Only 4 rooms, and very seldom were all 4 rooms full. Marie got paid for helping to do cleaning and that sort of thing. I don't remember if the boys got money for helping, but we all chipped in to do the cleaning. Later on, we began to have students who were going to Dixie College on a program, English language program. So they were there to learn English, and it was easier
as a second language.
As a second language. It was easier for them to live with a family so they could practice their English. So we had lots of students who stayed with us from Asia, Japan, Korea, some from everybody from Asia, from the Asian countries, was kind of aloof. The family in those countries is not it's not as central a part in their families as it was to us. And for instance, one of the students told me that he would get up on a Monday morning, ride his bike to the train station, park his bike there, get on the train, go to another train station and pick up another bike he had there to go to his school. And he would stay at his school all week long, Monday through Saturday. He would come home on Saturday in the afternoon and spend the Saturday afternoon and Sunday with his family, and then go back to the residential school, and he lived there all week. And for them, they were always so surprised that our kids were getting married when they were in their 20s, because for them it's like, oh, you have to go to school, you have to finish your education.
PhD.
You had to get your education, and then at least, usually some of the countries had to do 2 years of a forced military service, and then get married after that. And usually they weren't married until they were 30-something. That's more common now than it was then. Overall in the United States, it's even more common now than it was then. But they were surprised that we'd have a wedding for our kids in their 20s.
Then we had one other group that came in on every fall, the first weekend in October, and that was the St. George Marathon. And the marathon would bring people in from all over the world. We had one lady who was her first race, and she won her division that she was in.
She was under 30.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me, runners, the marathon runners, the women were faster when they were 50 than they were when they were 30. That was surprising to me. That the older they got, the faster they became. One year we had that woman who was the overall winner. We had another 2 who were winners of their age group. They have different categories for men and women. And it was really surprising. They loved staying with us because we were just a couple of blocks from the ending part of the marathon, which was the park.
It's also the place where they get on the buses early in the morning, too.
Right.
Now, one time we had one of the gentlemen and they came with 2 or 3 friends, booked the whole place up, and they had a gentleman, and we decided that year that we'd offer massages as well. And so we had the massage. The masseur would come to our house and set up the table and everything. We had that set up, and we had him partition off with drapes, and so they'd have privacy. And so then he wanted to be first, though, because he had to leave by a certain time to get down to Las Vegas and catch the airplane over back home to Minneapolis, St. Paul. Because he was going to run the next marathon the very next day in St. Paul. He called us back on that next day, which was Sunday. Called us back and gave us his times, and they were within seconds of each other.
Consistency,
Saturday.
2 days in a row.
Yeah.
We had some people who'd been to every state. This is one of the marathons they wanted to come to. St. George Marathon was well known because it started way up in the mountains. Where would it start? Up by
Central.
By Central. And it was mostly downhill. And so there was a very little part that was uphill, but it was mostly all downhill. And you could get a good time. They were always trying to come there to qualify for the Boston Marathon. I'll tell you another group that we had often. This was usually in August. In Japan, their school, it's like the whole country takes vacation in August because it's the hottest month, the most humid month in Japan. And so we would often get groups of students who would come. And I remember this one particular funny teacher, sensei they called him, and he was just real slight, and he would sit on his haunches. That's the way they often sit in Japan. So his knees were bent. He was sitting back and talking. But I remember he was so, what's the word? Embarrassed. He was embarrassed that our boys would burp.
We don't have boys that burp.
Oh, yes, we do. And they would put on a show for him, burping and burping. He'd say, "Oh, nasty boys, nasty boys." He again was one who wrote to us quite a bit after he'd gone home. They always like to have friends in America. In fact, we often had, when we were in Japan, we went to Japan to see Johnny and Shelby when Aspen was born. And it was so interesting how people would just stop us, people we didn't know, and they'd want to take a picture with us because to have a picture with an American was a big deal. And they always put their hands up like this, to get the picture taken.
And then but when you have a blonde, little Aspen was very blonde, and then of course Hazel and Solomon were also. But they'd love to take pictures of all of us together because of that.
Yep.
So now the next thing we had was, we had another group there.
I got to talk about Luis.
Okay.
So Luis was one of our favorite students going to school at Dixie College to learn English. And he took the missionary lessons. He played games with us. He went down to Grandma and Grandpa's house to play games with us. He was just one of the family. All the people we had, we didn't have very many, but the few that we had from the Latin American countries were always more friendly. Involved. They wanted to stay around in the evening. They wanted to have dinner with us if they were there. We'd invite them for dinner. And a lot of times the Asians, we didn't even know where they were. We didn't keep track of them, of course, but sometimes they'd be gone and come back in the middle of the night. We didn't see them very much at all, even though they were there all like for a month, maybe sometimes 2 months. Luis was the one that stayed with us the longest, and he was there when Grandma Hansen died, and he was very distraught about that because it was his grandma too. Grandma, he said, Grandma, Grandpa.
And he was from Bolivia.
No, he was from Colombia.
Yeah.
He was from Colombia. This is very interesting. So he had a brother who was older than he. His brother had been married, and this is the bad things in bad countries. His brother and his wife were on their honeymoon, and his brother was kidnapped because his brother was working with the construction. He was very good at construction, building roads. The mafia, whatever you call them in Colombia, kidnapped him to work on projects.
The cartels.
Cartel. They kidnapped him. His wife, was home, but he was gone for, I don't know, I think 18 months. while they were working on a project. They had him there helping them work on a project. And then afterwards, he was able to, this had happened before Luis came to stay with us. But because of that situation, he was able to apply for asylum in the United States and Canada. And Canada was the first to grant him asylum. Now, Luis met a girl at Dixie College, and he got married, Amber. And so we went to their wedding, and he was working on citizenship. And I'll tell you what, this is one thing that kind of annoys me about what's happening at our border today. We have people coming across the border illegally that are coming into our country and then getting given a plane ticket to go wherever they want to go, illegally. And yet Luis he started working on it after he left he wasn't living with us anymore, but we knew about it because we were friends. He was working on his citizenship papers, and it took him 4 or 5 years to get his citizenship. Lots of money, lots of fees, going to meet with the customs or whatever what you had to do. Immigration people. And they'd say, oh, you need this. They could have told him before, but he didn't find out till he went back, and so he had to come back again. 4 or 5 years it took for him to get his citizenship. Lots of money, lots of time to become a legal citizen of the United States. And yet we have people that are coming across, and just our country is not treating them equally, I don't think. I don't think it's fair to the people who've paid to do it the right way, the legal immigrants. I love people, and I think everybody should be given a chance, but anyway.
The station is not responsible for the opinions expressed by some of the hosts.
But it's one thing that we don't
we do
very closely
understand what the feelings are.
I do have a very sweet memory of Christmas time and waking up because the kids knew that he couldn't come in. I think probably Brian was the only one home at this time. And here's Luis and Brian sitting on the stairs waiting to come in to the living room, family room for Christmas morning. And Luis was just as excited as Brian was.
So that's mostly about the bed and breakfast. I think we operated it in different kinds of situations. We try to adjust.
Later
try
on,
to get more traffic.
Later on, we were better having monthly rentals, students. And one of those times, Marie moved up to a room of her own, living up on one of the small rooms upstairs, and she was paying us a little bit of money to help with utilities and all that, going to school at Dixie College. So she was one of our bed and breakfast renters.
Yep.
So anyway, that's a fun story. It's a great time of our life. People think it's real romantic to run a bed and breakfast. It is interesting, but it definitely is more of a hobby. For us, more of a hobby than an income producer.
Yes, it was.
But lots of good memories.
What time do we have?
I think we're about 6:30.
Okay.
5. All right.
So we appreciate everybody who's been watching these. This is episode number 5. We'll see you again.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Okay. Sayonara.
Bye-bye.
Adios.